Welcome to Yahoo Finance's flagship show, The Morning Brief. I'm Allie Canal. Let's get to the 3 things you need to know today. First up, President Trump moving to oust Fed Governor Lisa Cook. In a letter posted on Truth Social, Trump said he had sufficient cause to fire Cook based on the allegations that she made false statements on 1 or more mortgage loans. The move could give Trump another chance to name someone to the Fed board as he repeatedly pressures officials to lower interest rates. Lisa Cook refusing to step down, saying the president has no authority to remove her from her post. Cook was appointed by President Biden in 2022 and is the first Black woman to serve on the Fed board. Her term was not set to expire until 2038. Plus, the president's attack on the Fed is sparking a risk-off sentiment in markets. While stock futures are little changed amid the looming legal battle, we are seeing this play out in other asset classes. The president's actions prompting a sell-off in the dollar and longer-dated treasuries as traders assess the risk of longer-term inflation. Meanwhile, gold is on the rise amid Fed independence concerns. And on the trade front, President Trump is warning of steeper tariffs on China if rare earth exports are curbed. He said if Beijing won't provide the U.S. with magnets, he could weigh a tariff as high as 200%. The comments come after Trump met with South Korea's president at the White House, and they raised new questions about whether the current trade truce between the world's 2 largest economies can hold. Let's get a check on stock futures. We're holding up relatively well, all things considered. The uncertainty around Lisa Cook and her potential ousting top of mind for investors, but we are still seeing the major averages drift lower. You're seeing the S&P 500 futures down around 0.1%. Same with the NASDAQ and the Dow futures as well. I also want to get a check on the long end of the Treasury curve here. We are seeing yields tick up slightly for the 10-year as well as the 30-year. Now, as a reminder, when yields rise, that means investors are selling their bonds, and we tend to see those spikes around times of economic stability concerns. The Fed, obviously, a big pillar of that for the United States. So while these moves are relatively small, strategists on Wall Street are warning this morning that the rise in yields could intensify if Trump succeeds in replacing Cook with a more dovish policymaker. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that throughout today's show. And that's also why we're seeing the U.S. dollar continue to weaken. We're now hovering near the lowest levels since early 2022 as traders are factoring in that possibility. Well, President Trump on Monday saying he's firing Fed Governor Lisa Cook effective immediately over unproven allegations of mortgage fraud. The Fed official said in a statement she won't leave her post, adding that the president has no authority to terminate her. The move is a sharp escalation in the president's attempt to exert greater control over the Federal Reserve's independence. This past week, we spoke with several former officials about Trump's efforts to oust Cook. Here's what they had to say.
For a regulatory official to be demanding the resignation of an official outside of the purview of their regulation is, I think, something that's close to unprecedented, at least in recent years in the United States.
I view it as disgusting, actually. It looks like very thin. To me, it looks like a very thin rationale.
For the Federal Reserve, this will be a real test of its ability to carry out what is its most important function. Its design was intended to...
I want to bring in John Hilsenrath, StoneX senior advisor and Yahoo Finance contributor. John, you've covered the Fed for decades. You just heard from some of those former officials there. How unprecedented is this moment, and what was your reaction?
It is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, the Fed has come under pressure in the past from the White House. Famous cases in the 1980s, Paul Volcker almost resigned when Reagan administration officials pushed him to cut interest rates in the 1970s. Arthur Burns was under a lot of pressure. But I haven't seen anything like this where a governor is being told to step down, is being fired by the president. And there's a lot of ironies in this case. The president of the United States himself has been found guilty of financial fraud in the Letitia James case in terms of the Trump Organization, and also in the Alvin Bragg case with regard to payments to adult actresses. So this is high drama, and there's a lot at stake for the Fed.
Yeah, and on the one hand, John, the White House saying that this is about that alleged mortgage fraud. But on the other, many are viewing it as Trump trying to remake the Fed in his image. How do you weigh that legal issue versus the institutional precedent and what we could see from the Fed moving forward if this were to go through?
Right. So there are two pieces of this. One is on the substance of the accusation. If Lisa Cook did commit fraud, if she made misstatements on her mortgage applications, and that's against the law, then that's a real case and she should step down. And frankly, I've got to say, I find it a little unusual that Lisa Cook has not denied the allegation. She's denied the president's authority to fire her, but she hasn't denied the allegation. So I think a lot of people are still waiting to hear what she has to say about this. And in the world of dogs not barking, I also find it interesting that Jay Powell, the Fed chairman, has said nothing about this case and said nothing to defend Lisa Cook. So there's a lot here that still has to play out. In terms of the Fed, the institution and its independence, this is a very high stakes case because if the president gets 4 governors, there are 7 governors on the Fed board, if he gets 4 governors who are loyal to him, then they have a majority, and all of a sudden the president has remade the Fed in his own image. Those 4 governors, not only do they have the potential to overrule the chairman on decisions about interest rates, but they also have the authority, the legal authority, to fire regional bank presidents who they might disagree with on policy matters. So if Lisa Cook is forced to step down for one reason or another, then what we see is an acceleration of the president's efforts to reshape the Fed and to move it along the lines that he wants and demands.
Yeah, and in terms of Powell's silence, Yahoo Finance did reach out to the Federal Reserve for a comment. They said they did not have any immediate comment at this point. But historically, most chairs step down when their term ends. But Powell could legally remain a governor until 2028. So I'm curious from your perspective, given this new pressure from Trump, do you expect him to stay or go?
Well, you know, this is shifting every day. So it's hard to say how the next chapter of this drama is going to play out. But if Powell wants to stick around as a governor, as a counterweight to a Trump administration pressuring the Fed and potentially disturbing its independence, as you said, he has the potential to do that. I'll tell you what I expect. I expect Powell to play that card very close to the vest and to not give up the card until he has to. So I don't think he's going to announce any decision until well into next year, until these other conflicts are resolved, because he has some leverage with this threat to stay on at the board and be a counterweight to the president regarding what he wants to do with the institution.
And the Fed drama continues. John, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Well, let's dig into more top stories of the day. Stocks falling as President Trump looks to remove Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook from her position, and Trump threatening 200% tariffs on China if Beijing does not export rare earth magnets to the United States, plus South Korea sticking to the terms of its tariff agreement and pledging more investments in the U.S. Joining me now, Yahoo Finance senior reporter Brooke DePalma live at the NASDAQ, and Morning Brief Market Sunrise host Ramzan Karmali live from our London studio. So Brooke, let's start with you on this market action. How are U.S. investors digesting this latest news?
Allie, good morning. All three major indices are in the red heading into Tuesday's trading session as investors really weigh the possibility of federal Governor Lisa Cook stepping down after President Trump called for his firing. And this really comes into question of the Fed's independence and also what exactly this means if President Trump succeeds in replacing Lisa Cook with a more dovish policymaker. Taking a closer look at all three major indices, we have the NASDAQ leading the downward momentum this morning, heading into Tuesday's trading session. But I also want to take a look at the dollar. We are seeing a weaker dollar. It sold off immediately on the news when President Trump had posted to Truth Social that he intended to fire Lisa Cook. And now that's down roughly about nearly 0.2% this morning as we make our way into today's trading session. That is the lowest level since 2022. I also want to take a look at cryptocurrency. We saw Bitcoin sell off as well as Ethereum overnight. Bitcoin now trading around 110,000. We also have Ethereum falling lower as well. That cryptocurrency down as much as 3%, now seeing downward momentum even more, down more than 3%. And that really shows this risk-off investor right now, sort of trying to play into safe havens. Also, treasury yields, those are rising just ever so slightly. Important to keep a lookout on the 10-year and 30-year as we make our way into today's trading session and the implications that this could have on the bond market.
Yeah, crypto just continuing that sell-off that we saw yesterday. Now, on the trade front, President Trump just floated as much as 200% tariffs on China. Ramzan, how are global investors interpreting this latest threat, especially with China's top trade negotiator set to be in Washington later this week for talks?
That's right. It's really interesting timing, I have to say. So he made this 200% tariff threat on Chinese goods if China doesn't sell magnets to the US. And he was speaking after he just met with the South Korean president yesterday and confirmed those 15% levy for South Korea. And this all comes at a time when China's exports of rare earth magnets, well, they've actually recovered to levels seen before Beijing imposed export curbs back in April. Those have been lifted in June when there were the trade talks. Now, magnets shipped to the US actually surged more than 7 times, 660% in June from the prior month. Volumes are up 76% on a month in July as well. So it's clear that there's been some recovery in exports, but it's also interesting that China dominates rare earth magnet production. It controls about 90% of global supply, and that dominance is giving Beijing significant leverage in trade talks with Washington. And the US relies heavily on these rare earth magnets, as we know, for large manufacturing, like things like cars, electronics, renewable energy. And, you know, the markets basically are worried. Asian markets were all down across the board because of these trade threats that we're hearing from the Trump administration. But it's worth noting that the prices of these rare earth metals has actually, for two rare earth metals, has actually shot up as well today. And that's because a US miner, MP Materials, has stopped exports to China. So there's two sides to the story here.
Yeah, we'll see how those trade talks go later this week. Now, in the meantime, Brooke, the U.S. and South Korea just announced a flurry of deals at their summit yesterday. What do we know?
We now know that 15% tariff on South Korea is expected to say President Trump saying during or after that meeting that they stuck to their guns, that 15% tariff is in effect. Also, we know that South Korea businesses have agreed to further investments in the U.S., including an investment total of $150 billion in the U.S. It remains to be seen how exactly this will play out, but Korean Air agreeing that they intend to purchase aircrafts from Boeing. We also know that Hyundai, they said that they would add an extra $5 billion to the already $21 billion U.S. investment that they announced earlier this year. And also, we know that India, that is an additional 25% duty is set to take effect on Wednesday, and that would bring the total tariff on exports to the U.S. from India to 50%. And this can have major implications on retailers due to textiles, electronics, all those type of items coming from India, in addition to pharmaceuticals, engineering goods. And so I'll keep a lookout, especially on Thursday before the bell. We have Best Buy's earnings, and we do know that Best Buy's vendors source some of its goods from India.
Brooke, Ramzan, thank you so much. And a programming note, tune in to Yahoo Finance tomorrow after the market close for full coverage on NVIDIA's earnings results and our live sit-down interview with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. We'll be right back. Now time for some of today's trending tickers. We're watching Interactive Brokers, EchoStar, and Eli Lilly. First up, Interactive Brokers. Shares jumping this morning as the stock is set to join the S&P 500. The automated electronic broker will join the benchmark U.S. index before trading opens August 28th, replacing Walgreens Boots Alliance. Next, EchoStar. Shares soaring this morning as AT&T announced an agreement to buy spectrum licenses from the company for about $23 billion. AT&T says the deal will strengthen its low-band and mid-band spectrum holdings. Earlier this year, the FCC told EchoStar that it would investigate the company's compliance with federal requirements to build a nationwide 5G network. EchoStar, which owns both the Dish Network pay TV brand and Boost Mobile's wireless service, said in June that the probe had frozen its ability to make decisions regarding its Boost business, including continued network build-out. Finally, Eli Lilly. The company's experimental obesity pill helped patients lose 9.6% of their body weight in a trial that moves the company one step closer to a potential approval. It's the second of two pivotal trials Lilly plans to use to show global health regulators that its drug is safe and effective for patients with obesity. The first trial disappointed investors earlier this month who had been experiencing higher weight loss and lower rates of side effects. You can scan the QR code below to track the best and worst performing stocks with Yahoo Finance's trending tickers page. Well, stock futures are lower across the board here after President Trump's order to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook, marking an escalation in his attempts to control the Fed. I want to bring in Jed Ellerbrook, Argent Capital Management Portfolio Manager. So, Jed, let's start with that news. President Trump's move against Fed Governor Lisa Cook, that raises big questions about the future of Fed independence. Are you surprised that markets aren't down more on this news? We're not even really seeing that reaction in Treasury yields either.
Yeah, no. Hey, good morning, first of all. Sorry. No, I'm not terribly surprised that the markets are taking this news in stride. I think we understand Trump's negotiating style, which includes a lot of extreme threats. We also understand that he wants interest rates to be 200 or 300 basis points lower. And he's willing to take pretty unprecedented action to accomplish that. And this is one piece of that strategy, it seems. So I think the market's been aware for a while that this effort is underway.
Okay, so do you think markets are viewing this as another taco trade at work? Trump always chickens out?
No, I don't think so. I think that the market expects interest rates to be going lower starting soon, and that has some positive implications for U.S. economic activity and stock market short term.
So if the Fed's credibility, though, is called into question, does that change the calculus for rate cuts later this year? And what does that mean for risk assets more broadly? It sounds like you think more cuts could be coming.
I think that is a longer term concern that the market is not going to be terribly impacted by over, say, the next 6 months or 1 year.
So let's pivot to tech then, because NVIDIA reports on Wednesday and analysts keep raising the bar heading into this print. Demand still far exceeds supply. So what's the key thing that you're going to be watching for in this report?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, what comments or what guidance are they able to offer with regards to China? I don't expect much in that area. I think they're going to be hesitant to commit to any specific numbers over the next quarter or two, because those approvals and licenses are still very much in doubt, both on the U.S. side, but then also China's willingness to allow their companies to buy those. And then another issue is the broadening of the broadening of demand from their customers. We're moving from hyperscalers buying the vast majority of NVIDIA's chips to adding groups like the neoclouds, sovereign AI demand, robotics demand, etc. I think that broadening is going to continue, and that spells very good things for NVIDIA's stock and their revenues here near term.
Now, looking out over the next few years, you say that NVIDIA's growth could face more pressure from competitors like Microsoft, Amazon, OpenAI building out their own chips. Do you still foresee NVIDIA maintaining its lead, or are we near an inflection point where maybe competitors start to catch up?
We will see heightened competition from customer-created ASIC, semiconductor designs over the next several years. They take a while to develop. Amazon, for example, is on just its second, Trainium chip here right now. They've been onto this effort for 10 years or so. But we'll see Microsoft, Meta, OpenAI, et cetera, introducing their own chips into data centers here over the next couple of years. Broadcom and Marvell are partners that those firms use to design and develop those chips. Those companies will continue to do well, but I think that there's enough demand for all of these companies to be very successful. So I guess to answer your question directly, yes, I expect NVIDIA's market share of AI accelerator chips to decline over the next 5 years, but to remain at very high levels north of 50%. I think that's enough for NVIDIA stock to work.
And some macro trade news that we've been tracking is that President Trump is threatening new tariffs on countries that tax U.S. tech companies. Is this just more noise for markets, or could it create meaningful headwinds for some of those mega cap tech names if these threats turn into actual policy?
Yes, there is some degree of threat, certainly. But I think the market at this point is willing to trust that these threats are more a negotiating tactic than they are likely to be implemented. And remember, the U.S. markets are very tech dominated these days, and the large tech companies are less impacted by tariffs than industrial companies, for example, which now make up a fairly small chunk of the S&P 500.
And we continue to see tech leading this bull market higher, although there have been signs of rotation, so we'll see what comes about. But Jed, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Coming up on Yahoo Finance Opening Bid, our own executive editor, Brian Sazi, joins us now. So, Brian, what's coming up on the show?
Hey, Allie, top of the morning. We'll continue to cover all things Lisa Cook and that battle against President Trump. But I don't want people to forget about NVIDIA earnings. Those are coming up tomorrow. That is going to be the real market driver. And in our Power Player segment for today, McGraw-Hill CEO Simon Allen has stopped by Yahoo Finance HQ in New York City. Looking forward to chatting with him.
Looking forward to that too, Saz. Thank you so much. And that does it for Morning Brief. Much more ahead on Yahoo Finance.